Good morning. As some of you might already know, Windows 10 is reaching end of life on October 14th, 2025. So I think it's time to switch to Linux. In fact, I've already made the switch to Linux a little over a month ago, and I am loving it so far. I'm currently on KDE OS, which is an Arch Linux derivative. I wouldn't recommend this to new users though, because you basically have to maintain it as though you would an Arch Linux system. Now, I have some past experience using Arch Linux, among other distros, and I feel comfortable enough managing and maintaining my system. But there are more user-friendly alternatives for newer users out there, and I will be exploring one of them in this video. Alright, let's go over what you actually need in order to try out or switch over to using Linux on your computer. First of all, you need to be aware that Linux is very different from Windows. Everything functions very differently. Although you can make it look very similar to Windows, it will be a whole new ecosystem, and even the different distros do a lot of things differently from one another. So you need to be willing to tinker and learn something new. If you're already really happy using Windows, you might as well just stay on it. But if you're like me and are not happy with the direction Windows has been going for the last decade or so, then this is a great time to switch over and give it a try. Now, before you actually start, you definitely need to back up all of your important data, your videos, your pictures, anything you want to keep, because we will be repartitioning and formatting a drive. So make sure you have that in order before you go to the next step. So you're going to need a spare USB flash drive that you don't mind wiping, because we'll be replacing all the data on this later on. And you'll also need the official .iso image file from your distro's website. So what is a distro anyway? Well, it's short for the word distribution. And Linux is basically just the core of the operating system, the kernel, where a distribution is all the packages built around that kernel and the package manager for said distribution. Most Linux distros are based on either Debian, Arch, Fedora, OpenSUSE, or Gentoo, but there are some truly unique exceptions to this, like NixOS, which does everything a little differently, and there are probably some other exceptions as well, but I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, so please let me know in the comments if you know of another truly unique distribution that is not based on any of these 5. Now, for this demonstration, I've decided to go with LinuxMint. It is usually considered to be the most new user-friendly distribution. It's a distribution that is based on Ubuntu, which is based on Debian. Now let's navigate to the ISO downloads. We're going to get the latest version of LinuxMint, and I'm going to go with Cinnamon Edition simply because it's the default desktop environment for LinuxMint. But you could also go with XFCE or Mate or Mate, however you pronounce that, if you prefer. Let's hit download and find a mirror that's either trustworthy or close to you. I'm going to go with kernel.org because I know that's trustworthy. And save link as. Put it somewhere on your hard drive. In this case, I've already downloaded this, so I don't need to do this step again. But you need to put it somewhere where you'll be able to find it again. Now that we have our image file, we need to write it to our flash drive. And for Windows, the easiest way to do that is going to be using Rufus. I will leave a link to Rufus in the description of this video. Now, if you're already on Linux and just want to try out a different distribution, you can either use a GUI tool like KDE Image Writer or some equivalent piece of software. I have that right here, but I'm not going to use it because I want to use the more exciting method, which is dd from the command line. So let's find our image real quick. I put it in my downloads/ISOs folder. And you can see that our image is right here. This is the file name. Now, this is the commands I want to run. Sudo to get administrator privileges. dd is the utility we're using. if stands for input file. And then the path to the image. of stands for output file. And then the path to the device we're writing to. I think BS in this case is block size. Putting this at 4 megs makes it faster, I believe. Status equals progress just makes it so you can see the progress bar as it progresses, or at least some kind of output from it. And then the double ampersands and the sync. Sync is a separate command to make sure that everything has been written to the flash device before we continue. So I'm going to type lsblk in order to see my devices here. I know for a fact that STB is the one I want to write to, but you want to make sure that you got the right one here. Let's do sudo dd if equals path to your image, which in this case is going to be a relative path. We are in the correct folder, so we just need to type the name of the image in the current folder. And then output file equals dev stb. Just stb, not stb1 or anything. We want to write to the base device. And then block size equals 4m. Status equals progress. And sync. Now, dd is commonly referred to as disk destroyer, and that is because if you don't double check your inputs and outputs here, you can very easily lose your data by writing the wrong thing to the wrong place. So our input file is the LinuxMint ISO. Our output file is dev stb, which I'm certain that's the correct one for me. Everything else looks correct, so let's hit it. And I need to type my password here. And this is going to give us some idea of the progress being made because we did status progress. Now, depending on how slow your USB port or the flash drive is, this could take a while. I'm going to cut the video here and return when it's done. Alright, after about 5 minutes, that has finished writing to the flash drive. And now the next step is going to be to find a way to boot directly from that flash drive rather than my currently installed system. Now, different motherboard manufacturers will use different keyboard shortcuts for this, so I recommend either trying these blindly or checking your motherboard's manual. But basically what you need to do is restart your computer while the flash drive is plugged in to your USB port. And then as soon as the computer is starting, you need to hit the correct key to get into the BIOS or the boot menu and select the flash drive as the boot device for the next boot. Now, I would love to be able to do this on bare metal, as in installing it directly onto my PC, but I am currently really happy with my current installation of CachyOS, and I also don't really have a dual PC streaming setup with a capture card, so it would be really difficult for me to actually record the process on bare metal currently. But that is something that I would like to be able to do in the future, so Maybe in a future video I'll do that and try a bunch of different distros. But for now, I'm going to be starting in a virtual machine. So if you manage to get it to boot, this is what it's going to look like. This is a bootloader. We're going to hit Start LinuxMint. And I believe LinuxMint has a graphical installer and also a live environment. All right, we have a cursor. It plays a nice little sound. All right. All right, so we are actually in the live environment right now. We can use Linux without actually installing it. We can even bring up a web browser. This is very basic though. It is not intended for daily use, but you could use this as a recovery flash drive if you want to recover some files from a broken system, for instance. You have a terminal, a browser, a few applications, and you have, of course, the installer right here. But let's start the installation process, actually. Right, so the first step apparently is to select our language. I'm going to go with English. And the keyboard layout, for me, that would be Norwegian. Let me find it. There it is. We have our special Moonspeak characters working fine. Let's continue. Usually you want to install the multimedia codecs. The reason why this is a separate toggle is because Linux has a history of using only free and open source software. So some distros like to give you the option to stay mostly free and open source and not use any proprietary software. Right, so this is the scary part if you're doing this on bare metal. You get the option to erase your disk and install LinuxMint. It does come with a warning though, which is nice. Now, for me, since I'm doing this on a virtual machine, I'm not going to touch the advanced features. I'll look at them though. Right, so we could use a logical volume manager, but that's more of an advanced thing. You could also encrypt it. I'm going to go with the most basic option. You could also do something else and do it all manually if you're a more experienced user. But let's go with the most basic one here. Install now. They'll tell you which partitions will be changed, etc. Just going to hit continue here. Now at this point, actually no, we're going to have to make some more selections first. I'm going to select my location, and I need to create a user. The computer name, you can type whatever you like there. The username, you need to make a password for your user. I'm just going to make a reasonable password, but not a super complex one for this VM. And you can also just make it log in automatically. I prefer to actually have to type my password. You could encrypt your home folder if you're worried about other people using the computer and looking at your files. But for your home computer, that's usually not required. Although, I guess if someone steals your whole computer, having the home folder encrypted will at least protect your files that way. They won't be able to access them without your password. Alright, now we're moving on to the actual installation process, and this is where it has already overwritten the partitions and is copying files. There's no turning back now. I don't actually know how long this is going to take in this VM, so I might make a cut here. We'll see. Yeah, it's taking quite a while. So I'm going to make a cut here, and then I'll return when it's done copying files. All right, that only took a couple of minutes for me. Now we're left with a complete installation. And I can either continue testing in the live environment, or I can hit restart right now. So let's do that. And now it should just automatically reboot into... Oh, never mind. I need to remove the installation medium. In this case, the VM is doing it for me automatically, but if we're doing this on bare metal, this is when you eject the USB stick, so it can boot from your disk instead. And then hit enter. Alright, I managed to boot from the fresh install. I'll log in here. And we have a nice welcome screen. We can choose to turn this off, or we can look through some recommended steps after installing. Alright, after booting into the system for the first time, you might want to change a few settings. For instance, this resolution seems wrong, so we're gonna change that to 1920 by 1080, for instance. Now I have a bigger monitor than that, but the virtual machine has some limitations when I'm not using hardware acceleration, but this looks nice enough. And then we can also install some updates. Welcome to the Update Manager. Now, I'm not super familiar with LinuxMint, actually. I haven't used it in many, many years. This is my first time installing it in a long time. So this is all new to me as well. You want to switch to a local mirror? Yes, let's do that. And we'll have to type in our password. Hang on, select a mirror. Oh, it actually automatically tests the speeds of various mirrors. That's nice. I should get even better speeds than this, though, once it gets to Norway. Actually, it might also be another limitation of the VM, not getting my full speeds here. I will simply select this one, because it seems to be the strongest one on this test. And then we could also select source code repositories if we wanted to build stuff from source. I don't want to do that right now. Let's click there to update the apt cache. That's it for that, I guess. And now we get to apply an update. Yay! Type in our password again. And what is really cool about Linux is it uses package managers. So instead of going to a website and downloading a program from a website and then using an installer wizard, most of your software will be just available in a package manager and will be kept up to date by that same package manager. So there's a bunch of updates here. I'm going to install them all. It wants my password again. And it's currently installing those updates. Well, I guess that doesn't expand. No, you don't actually need to look at this terminal output if you're using the software, the GUI update manager. I just like to have a look at it in case there's an error message, which for a stable distribution like Mint or Debian, there shouldn't be any errors when you're just updating unless you've tinkered a lot with your system. But occasionally it might happen. Alright, the updates have finished, and it wants to reboot because it actually updated the kernel and a few other core components of the system. Now, as opposed to Windows, Linux will never force you to update or reboot. I voluntarily hit the update button there. It wouldn't have done that automatically. At least most distros don't do that. And I can also choose not to reboot right now if I don't want to. Although it is recommended after updating the kernel and other core components. So let's do that. We're gonna hit shut down, I guess? Yeah, shut down, restart. And it's already restarting. And it's already back. It's done. That was really quick after an update. Imagine if Windows could update this quickly. That would be insane. And there you have it. We have a fully up-to-date and working version of LinuxMint. From this point onward, you can do whatever you like. Just try exploring Linux and installing programs through the software manager, I believe. Yeah, this should have a lot of software for you. So you don't actually go to a website and download a program. You just use the software manager. And it looks like it actually has FlatHub enabled by default, which is really nice. This gives us a lot of extra access to different software like OBS from FlatHub and Discord, as well as Steam if you like games. Yeah, you can basically do almost anything on Linux that you would otherwise do on Windows. It's great. Alright, that's the end of this tutorial. But before I go, I would like to ask you guys to please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, of course. Leave a dislike if you didn't. But also, please leave a comment explaining why or what you would like to see me do better. I'm also interested in hearing from you guys about your previous experiences with trying Linux for the first time. Let me know what your first distro was and how that went. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Bye for now.